With Dan Morgan as the Panthers general manager, is the team finally going to be able to hit on some day 3 picks and beyond? We'll talk about it right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, the part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Fridays throughout the entirety of the offseason, I'm right here on the show answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me over on Twitter at Julian Council to get your questions in for this week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. We are once again grading year one of Dan Morgan as Carolina Panthers general manager. We've gone through all 9 trades that he's made as the Panthers GM. Yesterday, we looked at his free agency class, and today we're going to look at his first draft class. And this is not just going to be the guys that were drafted. It's also going to be the undrafted free agents, Julian Council, Damani Richardson, 2 guys who stepped in as starters later on into the season as they have to be a part of this conversation. We can't just sit here and talk about Michael Barrett, who never stuck around for the regular season, and not give grades for Julian Council and Damani Richardson on today's show. So I'm going to look at picks 1 through 7 and those last 2 guys that were UDFAs that became pretty significant pieces here to the Carolina Panthers offense and defense at the end of the 2024 season. But let's start off with a day 1 pick, which, remember, the Carolina Panthers were not supposed to have. They were not slated to select until 33rd overall, top of the second round on Friday night there in Detroit, but they could not wait. Dan Morgan had to make a pick, and really they had to have Xavier Legette and the 5th-year option, which we discussed last week about that trade and whether it was the right thing for Carolina to do. Now let's discuss the selection of Xavier Legette and whether he was the right player for the Carolina Panthers to select, which of course goes into the discussion that we had last week about the trade overall, but just focusing in on the player himself, Xavier Legette. What a great story this guy is, losing his mother, Anita Reeves Legette, back in July of 2015 after a long fight with breast cancer. His father, Anthony Legette, died back in March of 2019 as well. Neither of them got to see him graduate high school or college or play a single snap at South Carolina or, of course, so far in the NFL with the Carolina Panthers. And that is certainly is heartbreaking. And he's somebody who went through a lot while down there in Columbia. His first 4 years at South Carolina, he had 42 receptions, 423 yards, and 5 touchdowns. He was not on anybody's radar at all when the 2023 season started. But right here in Charlotte, in the exact same stadium where he now calls home his workplace, Bank of America Stadium, he went off on the North Carolina Tar Heels in that game to open up the season. He was spectacular in that game. He was spectacular the entirety of the 2023 season. It really started in the bowl game, in the Gator Bowl the year prior, right on New Year's Eve against Notre Dame, where he had a couple touchdown catches in that game, but it really happened as a breakout in 2023. 71 receptions, 1,255 yards, 7 touchdowns, became the 5th Gamecock in program history to have over 1,000 yards receiving in a single season. He was a stud, and he was a second-team All-SEC player. It made sense why teams were attracted to the size, the speed, and the sudden burst of skill that we saw from Xavier Legette his final year at South Carolina. But I was skeptical of whether he made a lot of sense for Carolina or for anybody in the first round. He was clocked as the fastest player in college football when carrying the ball back a season ago. And hell, that's what you want to see. Carolina certainly needed speed. He was a deep ball threat with Spencer Rattler, who's now down there in New Orleans, throwing the ball there in Columbia. in the fall of 2023. So there was a lot to like, but you had to dive in deeper. So why was it that Xavier Legette didn't come out and play well until his fifth and final season? Really, if you want to go even earlier, the bowl game there against Notre Dame. Why did it take so long for him to play well? Well, maybe because he lost his parents, maybe because the quarterback play wasn't great down there in South Carolina. The coaching changes, whether it's head coaching change, position coach change, all of that. There was a motorcycle, scooter, moped accident where he did get an affectionate nickname. So was it necessarily that serious of an injury? I don't know what it was, but I just came out and said to y'all throughout the process, and still say it now, he's not going to have 5 years in the NFL to break out like that. It's possible with the fifth-year option, if he plays well enough next 2 seasons, that he can get that option and then have that fifth year that didn't have that breakout. But I don't think Carolina's trying to wait 4 more years for that to happen. They want to see it, I'm sure, this upcoming season in 2025. But looking at Xavier Legette this past season, 49 receptions, 497 yards, 4 touchdowns. Comparing him to the guy that they drafted the year prior and the guy whose spot he took as the number 3 receiver early on this season, and Jonathan Mingo, who's no longer Carolina Panther, Legette was light years better as a rookie than what Mingo provided to Carolina in that disastrous 2023 season where they went 2-15. He was so much better, and you could see the glimpses of the promise, but the problem was he couldn't hold on to the ball. Sometimes 7 drops. That's he's credited with this season. Had a receiving success rate of 44%, which is not that great. Catch percentage, though, 58.3. You'll take that, certainly. He was fine. You can see that he could be someone that the Panthers can build around. But will he ever be the number 1 wide receiver here in Carolina? That is a key question to ask for someone who Carolina felt was worthy of them trading up into the first round to select, and not only that, but to potentially down the road utilize fifth-year option. And it's not a given that he'll get the fifth-year option down the road. He has to earn it, just like every single player drafted in the first round this past year has to earn it. Looking at it so far, like obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. probably going to get that. Malik Neighbors probably going to get that. Rome Odunze probably going to get it. Brian Thomas Jr. Like early on, feels like all those guys who were receivers drafted ahead of him are on their way to likely getting their fifth-year options, provided that they continue the momentum that they have going into their second years in the NFL. And you would like to see Xavier Legette be able to build off of a lot of positives, but also take another step moving forward. And just comparing him to the guys, and we did this last week when talking about the draft pick and really the trade that the Panthers made to get up there to take Legette. Marvin Harrison Jr., 62 receptions, 885 yards, 8 touchdowns. Certainly far better than Xavier Legette was. Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas Jr. as well. And those are guys that were, at least Harrison, Neighbors, and Odunze, those are top 10 picks. Brian Thomas Jr. down there in Jacksonville, 87 receptions, 1,282 yards, 10 touchdowns. Like that's a guy who wasn't drafted that much higher than Xavier Legette. Xavier Worthy, 59 receptions, 638 yards, 6 touchdowns. Ricky Pearsall, 31 receptions, 400 yards, 3 touchdowns as well. He missed time because of a gunshot to the chest, which caused him to miss a lot of time. And he came out there and still had a solid year considering all that he went through. And guys even behind Xavier Legette, like Keon Coleman, 29 receptions, 556 yards, 4 touchdowns. Ladd McConkey, 82 receptions, 1,149 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Legette, looking at PFF, was ranked 13th among qualifying rookie wide receivers. So he wasn't atop of that list, and he certainly did not necessarily stack up to those guys that were also selected in the first round. And when you take a receiver in the first round, you're hoping that he's going to be your number 1. If not that, he's going to be a really high tier number 2. And right now, I don't know if I see that. And I asked last week, I'll ask again. 8 receivers were taken in the first 34 picks of the 2024 NFL draft. How many of those can you confidently say Xavier Legette is going to be better than moving forward? 1, possibly 2? I don't know. It's not a high number, but that's not to say that he can't be a beneficial piece to Carolina, that he cannot spend a long time here in Charlotte and help his team win games. It's just first round pick, making that trade, but of course, just focusing on the pick itself. I'm going to have to give it a C right now. Average, Not great, not bad, certainly. Had his moments, So we'll see how it plays out. But right now, a C grade for Xavier Legette, just like the C grade I gave the trade overall by getting him there in the first round. And probably the trade grade should probably be better. I think I focused a little bit more too much on the pick there, the actual selection, than the trade itself, which the trade itself made a lot of sense for Carolina. So maybe reverse that and have that as more of like a B plus trade, even if I felt like it was kind of unnecessary, but didn't have to give up too much to get it. But the player himself, the selection itself, yeah, C for me when looking at Xavier Legette so far in Carolina. Day 2, Jonathan Brooks, Trevon Wallace, come on down to Carolina. How do I look at those picks so far after one season? I'll tell you in just a moment here on the Locked On Panthers. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories was attending a concert last year. The energy and excitement were unforgettable. Now, Gametime has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Gametime Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Looking back at day 2 of the Carolina Panthers 2024 NFL draft class, and also kind of thinking about last week when grading the trades possibly was a little more harsh than I should have been based off of who was selected and not necessarily the trade itself and what the compensation was. Now, of course, it's important to understand who was taken, as that's a big part of grading a trade and looking back at it almost a year later. So kind of trying to focus more now, of course, just on the selection itself. The Carolina Panthers, as we know, day 2, they traded back and traded up to take Jonathan Brooks, the running back out of the University of Texas, there with the 46th overall pick in the 2024 NFL draft. And when he was selected, we all were a little skeptical because we didn't think that Carolina was going to be in the market for a running back. We thought that maybe they'd go after a center or a corner or really anything other than a running back, because they had Chuba Hubbard coming back as a running back 1 in 2024. They had Miles Sanders likely going to be in his final year of his deal after failing as a top free agency signing for Carolina to be their top running back in 2023. You had 2 guys of experience and Raheem Blackshear as well. So why go out there and draft a running back in the second round? And not just a running back, but the first running back taken off the board. And we already heard from Dave Canales that running backs mattered in Carolina, that they want to be stubborn about running the football. And certainly, yes, running backs matter, as they drafted Jonathan Brooks. They paid Chuba Hubbard. As far as the stubborn about running the football thing, still kind of waiting on that to actually be the case. But anywho, looking at that pick, I wasn't a fan of taking a running back. I was certainly a fan of the player because I thought Jonathan Brooks actually was excellent at Texas. His final year there on the 40 acres, his first year really being the top running back. And you look at that offense with Xavier Worthy, with Jatavion Sanders, who later was drafted here in Carolina. We'll talk about him a little bit later on. Adonai Mitchell, Quinn Ewers, a really good offensive line. He, being Jonathan Brooks, was one of the key cogs, and really they missed him in the playoff once he went down that torn ACL. And if had he played, maybe they win a Sugar Bowl. I don't think they win a national championship. We'll never know. Either way, Jonathan Brooks was really good for Texas, both as a ball carrier, but also as a receiver. And you could see the plan the Panthers had from him. You could understand the idea around it, where Chuba, more of just a runner, not a great receiver. And he certainly improved in 2024. Miles Sanders had been good receiver early on in his career, hadn't been asked to do too much of that in the latter stage of his career there in Philadelphia. Was a solid runner, but wasn't in 2023. They were looking for an all-around back, someone who could tote the rock, someone who also could catch the ball at the backfield. And there were some highlights that Panthers on social media showed that really showed you what the idea was. And unfortunately, we didn't get to see it play out other than just 3 games and really 9 quarters this season, as he missed the majority of the season, coming back and making his debut against Kansas City after the bye week, after the Panthers had won there in Germany. He had 9 rushing attempts for 22 yards, 3 receptions for 23 yards. And overall, looking at PFF, which isn't necessarily the fairest, his grade was a 61.5. But this is what I found to be very interesting about what PFF graded him on, as far as in those 3 games, really 9 quarters that Jonathan Brooks played in 2024. Look at his receiving grade. It was an 83.5. The only other rookie running back who had a better receiving grade was Bucky Brooks down there in Tampa Bay. And then that's not Bucky. It's Bucky. What isn't Bucky Brooks? That's not who it is. Bucky Brooks is the football writer. I mean, Bucky, damn, I can't remember. I already forgot. Bucky Irving. Jeez, Bucky Irving down in Tampa Bay is the only other running back in the 2024 class who had a better receiving grade than Jonathan Brooks. And then you look also at pass blocking grade, very important to be able to protect the quarterback. 82.2, which was the best among all the rookie running backs in the NFL, according to PFF. Now, understand, not like Jonathan Brooks played a lot, and you have to take those numbers with a grain of salt. But in the limited sample size, he showed you the vision that Carolina had when they took him with the 46th pick, when they decided that they need to trade Indianapolis to go up there and to get their guy. The problem is he retore his ACL. Second time in 13 months. You paid Chuba Hubbard now. Miles Sanders, I assume, is out the door. The Panthers will need to address the running back depth this offseason, as Brooks may be back at some point next year, but he may be done for the year. Who really knows at this point in time? I hate to do it because I do think the player can be good, but now that he's had 2 injuries, missed the majority of his rookie season, and is going to miss the majority of his sophomore season in all likelihood, I got to give it a D+. You didn't need a running back at that point in time. You have a running back now who you've paid and has been outstanding for you. And you got a guy that has not 1, but 2 ACL tears in that same knee. I see the vision. I still do. Just the execution so far has not been great. And it's not anyone's fault. The Panthers didn't have to take him, of course, but it's just dumb luck that things have not worked out health-wise for Jonathan Brooks here in Carolina. So a D+, being as nice as I can here, because it's just like probably worse than that, but a D+ because he's good. He can be, just hasn't been out there on the field. Now, they did make another pick and another trade there on day 2 of the 2024 NFL draft, and they took a linebacker, another spot where I don't think linebacker was on not even the bingo card, on the big board for any Panther fan heading into the draft. You had Shaq Thompson coming back off of injury. They signed Josie Jewell in free agency after he had a career year, the only time he spent with Ejiro Rivera, the Panthers defensive coordinator. So do you really need a linebacker? Well, the Panthers weren't doing the whole, we're trying to win right now. They were thinking down the road, like with the Brooks pick. They didn't need him right away. They were thinking down the road. And Trevon Wallace, their 3rd round pick 72 in the draft out of the University of Kentucky, they were also thinking down the road. And turns out down the road was, well, it was like week 5 of the NFL season for Carolina, as Shaq Thompson tore his Achilles, was lost for the year. Josie Jewell also missed some time this season. Trevon Wallace ended up starting 8 games, and he had 64 tackles, 2 tackles for loss. His PFF grade wasn't the best. It was a 56, as he did qualify. He was 68th out of 82 qualifying linebackers. His run defense grade wasn't anything to write home about either. 46.9. That was 83rd among 86 qualifying linebackers. And looking at his rookie class, of the 7 that qualified as far as the not being a part, like not with the snap minimum PFF, he was 6th among the 7 of them, behind Edgerrin Cooper, Peyton Wilson, Omar Spades, Tyrese Rice, and Darius Moasso. Still don't know how to pronounce his name from a week ago. I look past a lot of that. This is not somebody who was expected to come in and play right away. And you really looked at him during training camp. This was the one rookie that was really kind of turning heads as he was making some plays. And you thought to yourself, man, well, this guy's not going to play a lot, but if he does, maybe he can actually help out this team. And it turns out he did help out the Carolina Panthers. I do think just watching the games that he was a lot better than necessarily the way that PFF graded him. And again, use PFF as a tool It's not the gospel to me. It shouldn't be the gospel to you, but if it is, then that's totally fine. If that's what you want to do, it's just a way to evaluate these guys just off of not just completely looking at the games, but also, I mean, they look at the games, they have their grading system and all that. I thought that Trevon Wallace being a 3rd-round pick that you had to throw in there as a starter, as a rookie, and the way he played, and now he's going to be your starter next year. Now he has that experience. That's a B+ to me. Absolutely. So that's a B+ grade for Trevon Wallace, a D+ grade right now for Jonathan Brooks as far as those day 2 picks for Dan Morgan and the Carolina Panthers. What about day 3 and also the 2 UDFAs that ended up being significant impact players for the Carolina Panthers in 2024? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football action. That's where PrizePicks comes in. If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, PrizePicks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With PrizePicks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns, and for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money, you can make your picks in less than 60 seconds. And whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or want to cash out quickly, PrizePicks has got you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. Here's a special offer for you Locked On Panthers listeners. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's PrizePicks. Run your game. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. It feels like since the inception of the Carolina Panthers organization that they have really struggled when it comes to the latter rounds of the NFL draft. Used to be one day, and then it used to be the long second day. Now they've broken it up to 3 days, but day 3, which we're going to look at now, rounds 4 through 7, the Panthers have not historically done a very good job at taking those players, whether it was Scott Fitter as a general manager, Marty Herney 1.0 and 2.0, Dave Gettleman. They did not do well really past the first and second round. In most cases, really past the first round. And the hope is that Dan Morgan will buck that trend. And looking at the picks so far, has Dan Morgan potentially done that? Let's go to the beginning of day 3, round 4, pick 101. The Panthers still had a pretty obvious need. I was saying tight end. Get a tight end. My guy out of Texas, JT Sanders, he's sitting there. Why not make it happen? And the Panthers made it happen. That was my favorite pick at the time, and looking at it right now, still my favorite pick as Carolina Panthers with that pick in the 4th round, pick 101, selected Trevon Sanders, tight end out of the University of Texas this past season. He played in 16 games, starting in 8 as Tommy Trimble and Ian Thomas both battled injuries in 2024. And really going all the way back to training camp and the preseason, JT Sanders was thrust into duty with the first team, and I think that really benefited him. Also having a guy like Jordan Matthews, they converted wide receiver to a tight end, also helped as far as his leadership. And JT pointed out what guys like Tommy and Ian did behind the scenes, even when they were there on the medical table, helping him get up to speed and be able to make an impact for Carolina, which he did. 33 receptions, 342 yards, and a touchdown this past season. Had a 51.2 success rate as far as receiving goes, a 76.7 catch percentage. Love to see that. PFF, again, not enamored with Trevon Sanders, who coming out of the gate really was struggled. He was not good. He was kind of a liability for the team. It kind of is lying. He was a liability for the Panthers early on, but he got his sea legs under him, got more experience. He started to have the game slow down, and he played well. But then, he had the neck injury in that Kansas City game where he made a great leaping catch in that game, was making some plays, and then gets hurt before the half, gets carted off. Certainly, that was a scary moment. I remember I was there in the stands and happy, or in the press box, whatever, happy that he turned out to not be significant, where he only missed one game. And once he came back, wasn't really involved. And Dave Canales said multiple times across the final couple of weeks that we got to get him more involved. And, well, he never got him more involved, which maybe that's why PFF had him so graded so lowly. I thought, though, that JT Sanders was exactly what Carolina needed. They have not been able to replace Greg Olsen. He has not necessarily done that just yet, but he is the one, it looks like, who has the best opportunity to do that. A true pass catching tight end. Ian Thomas was a basketball player that started playing football and came out looking good, but it just never really worked out, especially once Rule came around. Tommy Trimble wasn't that guy at Notre Dame, was unlikely to be that guy in the NFL, and can still be a solid player for Carolina, but just not in that capacity where Sanders showed it at Texas, was the second best tight end across those 2 years where he was a starter at UT behind Brock Bowers in college football. And looking at just his draft class, like PFF has him graded 5th among the tight ends draft class that met the minimum there on PFF. So he's behind Brock Bowers, of course. He's behind AJ Barner, Brevin Spanford, and Theo Johnson. Bowers, Barner, and Theo Johnson were all drafted. Spanford out of Minnesota was a UDFA who played for the Cowboys and really didn't even, looking at stats, didn't really do much. But if you look at just all the rookie tight ends, JT Sanders was second among them in receptions and receiving yards. The only guy he's behind, of course, Brock Bowers by a mile. But Brock Bowers, as we knew, was a much better player in college and was likely always going to be a much better player than JT Sanders in the NFL. So of all the rookie tight ends, the only one who statistically receptions, receiving yards, who was better than JT Sanders this past season was the one guy that you would expect to be better by a lot, and that was Brock Bowers. So I will take that, and I will also take that as a B+ grade for the Carolina Panthers, taking Ja'Tavion Sanders there with pick 101 in the 4th round. Going to the 5th round later on that day, pick 157, they decided to go with a corner and really a guy who had never played nickel, but they felt like could play nickel, Shaw Smith Wade out of Washington State. And you listen to the broadcast, Daniel Jeremiah was talking about this guy who's a sure tackler, who can help out this team in that way, and we'll see how he performs. He was the defensive MVP there of the Senior Bowl with a couple interceptions, his first week ever playing inside in the slot, that nickel corner position, and turns out he's going to be pretty good at it. It looks like he played in 14 games this past year, starting 4 of them as he took over the starting role, had 39 tackles. And here's the important thing, again, mentioned by Daniel Jeremiah right off the cuff once he was drafted, 4.9 missed tackle percentage this past season. That was the lowest among defensive backs on the team. The next closest was Mike Jackson at 7.1. That's significant when you look at it. And then look at the guys that he replaced there at nickel. Troy Hill started the season off before being cut, 13.5 missed tackle percentage. Dane Jackson, who was supposed to be the starting outside corner opposite of JC, ended up having to play nickel, then was benched in favor of Shaw Smith Wade, 23.3 missed tackle percentage. 4.9 compared to 13.5 and 23.3. Sure tackler. The Panthers got that. Absolutely. Now, his grade, PFF-wise, overall was not great. 51.6. 107th out of 118 corners. Don't love that. Coverage grade, even worse, 49.6. He ranked 18th among the 20 qualifying rookie cornerbacks this past year. I'm looking at a guy that was drafted in the 5th round that was a sure tackler on a team that really had a big problem tackling anybody this past season. He's going to get better in coverage. Got an interception this year. Got to start. Got that experience. And if you get a 5th rounder, especially for this organization, to go out there and to start as a rookie and earn that job, that is a successful pick. So right now, a B for me when I look at Shaw Smith Wade here in Carolina. Looking at the final 2 guys that are selected there in day 3 for the Carolina Panthers. Round 6, pick 200, Jaden Crumedy, defensive tackle at Mississippi State. Only played in 5 games after missing the first 12, recovering from ankle injury, and also they were trying to just kind of ramp him up. Had 13 tackles in those 5 games. PFF grade 42.5. If you ignored a snap minimum, he was 24th out of 28 rookie interior defensive linemen. It's a C for me right now. Missed a lot of time. Wasn't necessarily an impact guy once he got in there. It's C is just basically like average. So it's not really saying anything good or bad. We'll see how that works out. Michael Barrett was a 7th round pick, comes from that trade the Panthers made to get Deontay Johnson, sending Dante Jackson to Pittsburgh. He was picked 240. Michael Barrett, linebacker of Michigan, ended up being traded to Seattle in exchange for Mike Jackson, player for player trade. He was not going to make the team. And I don't really know how to grade this. He was a guy who was drafted. He was a 7th round pick. I don't really look at 7th-round picks as guys who will make the team. So I guess it's kind of a failed draft pick. So I suppose it's an F, but also is like, I don't really care that much at this point in time. It led to Mike Jackson. So the trade itself was an A as I gave it. The pick itself, it didn't work out. You hoped that he could be a special teams ace, wasn't going to make the team. So F maybe, but also whatever. Jalen Coker, Damani Richardson would be remiss if I don't bring these guys up after the impact that they made as undrafted free agents in 2024. Coker, a wide receiver out of Holy Cross up there in Worcester, Mass, played in 11 games, started in 4, 32 receptions, 478 yards, 2 touchdowns, had a 58.7 success rate, receiving the ball, 69.6 catch percentage as well. Solid. And there's a question about this guy's speed. What game was it? Was it Dallas where it was blown coverage, but the fact that he ran away from like 60 yards, that is one area where maybe it's not that concerning at all. So kudos to him there. His PFF grade, 72.8, which is really good, especially for a guy in his circumstance. 6th among qualifying rookie receivers. He was 43rd among wide receivers overall in the NFL. This is somebody that you can build around. Absolutely. And he was more impressive than the guy you took in the first round, which is why the guy you took in the first round, Xavier Legette, I gave him a C grade. Not saying that he can't get better, that he can't be a key cog, because I do think he will be for Carolina. I just don't think he'll be the guy. I don't necessarily believe Jalen Coker will be the guy, but you can certainly talk me into Jalen Coker maybe being that number 2 guy, possibly. Now, we'll see if that's how it works out down the road. But right now, you got a guy who was an undrafted free agent, earned a spot on this team, was cut, then they brought him back, and he balled out at points in times. So, yeah, this is an A, obviously. Damani Richardson, the final one, safety out of Texas A&M down there in College Station, or Bryan College Station, technically. Played in 14 games, starting 5 as a rookie. 51 tackles, 2 pass deflections, and an interception as well. He really burst onto the scene one of those Mondays down there in training camp here in Uptown, right off of Cedar Street. I remember being out there. He picked off Bryce Young, not necessarily the best sign for Carolina, and he also had a pick over against Jack Plummer. Yeah, Jack Plummer. Wasn't sure whether it was a pick or not. Jero was saying we're counting it. And, well, 2 picks, and he came out there, played well also in the preseason game, ended up making the roster as the Panthers really wanted to be deep at safety, and they certainly were as he made it. And he had a 60.1 PFF grade. That was the highest, by the way, among Panther safeties this season. So a undrafted rookie free agent came in and was better than all the other guys, according to PFF, who played safety this past season, which speaks volumes considering 2 of those safeties that were brought in were free agents that were primarily here because of the defensive coordinator, Ejiro Evero. He was 7th, Damani Richardson was, among 11 qualifying rookie safeties. Again, undrafted free agent rookie, earns a spot on the team, gets to start, is now in position to be a starter next season at that safety spot as we sit here on Tuesday, January 21st. Yeah, like Coker, this is an A. That is successful for Dan Morgan and for the Carolina Panthers. Overall, looking at this draft class, going to keep looking back at it. And I've done this last year. I think I looked at the 21 class maybe, and this year I look at the 22 class. Once you get 3 years in, you have a better understanding of how those classes have panned out. So far, I think this class has panned out fairly well for the most part. Like, of course, Legette's playing. That's a good thing. Brooks is not playing. That's a bad thing. Wallace is starting. That's awesome. Sanders is starting. That's awesome. Smith-Wade's starting. That's awesome. You look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys from the rookie class that are prepared to start again in 2025. And then whenever Brooks gets healthy, that's a 7th. That's a great thing to have. You have to be able to hit on those rookie guys, have some young, cost-controlled players on your roster that can be impact players, and you can build around moving forward. And it looks like Dan Morgan has finally found a way to buck the trend and be able to find guys on day 3 and also sign some guys off the street to come in and to elevate this roster. So job well done there from Dan Morgan. Speaking of Dan Morgan, tomorrow we're going to look at everything in totality, the trades, the free agency signings, the draft class, and discuss whether the Panthers have their right guy at general manager moving forward in Dan Morgan. It's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all, subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me Julian Council over on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Friday I'll be back answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me over on Twitter to get those questions into me right now. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding, and I'll talk to y'all on Wednesday.